All right, let's move on to our next team, and we want to talk about Iowa State, the Cyclones here. This is a team that's not in the AP Top 25, but we think this is a team that could be one of the fun turnarounds, one of the fun teams that are really fun to look at. This is a rebuilt roster all over again, bringing some of my good friends from St. Bonaventure. If you've heard from our past podcasts, that's some of my roots as well. Jaron Holmes, Ozun Ozuni. I mean, these guys are super fun to watch, and they are going to be guys that you should be paying attention to, especially Ozun. Ozun is going to be very fun, averaging 11.3 points per game, 7.5 rebounds. I mean, he's good. Don't get me wrong. He's good. I'm excited to see what he does in the Big 12 at that level. Watching him in the A10 for the past few years, I mean, it's going to be heartbreaking to not see him in brown for the Bonnies, but it's going to be cool to see him in red and yellow for Iowa State. I'm looking forward to that one. But they're not the only transfers. You got a Temple guard and Jeremiah Williams, who should be pretty decent as well. He can facilitate the ball, average almost 5 assists per game. That's something that's actually going to be absolutely huge for some of these transfers. And then got some decent ones coming off the bench in Hanson Ward from VCU, another Atlantic 10 transfer coming over. And then from Eastern Kentucky, Trey King, who was with Eastern Kentucky in 2020. So that's also something to keep in mind. So maybe a year off is that a good thing, a bad thing? We'll see what happens in that aspect. Ozun's going to be the big guy to look for. And also, I think Jared Holmes, who also was a guy for St. Bonaventure, those are going to be your two stars, which I'm not even being biased. I think they're really going to shine for the Cyclones this year. Coming from a team like St. Bonaventure, who was in the preseason ranked top 25 last season, they got beat up with all their transfers, and most of them coming to the Cyclones.
And again, you and I watch a lot of Atlantic 10 basketball. Those two guys played better against better competition. It's not that they were lollygagging or just saying, I can take the night off. I mean, they always played hard and they were always productive. But the tougher the opponent, the better they played. I want to mention a different King, and that's Eli King. Coming in on this recruiting class, he was Mr. Minnesota basketball player. Reports on him really, really shining. Okay. He could be a star almost right away. If he does indeed step in and produce at even the good level with the transfers that are already there. You talked about Williams. Iowa State could surprise people. And there's a lot of cynicism because they went from 2 wins to 22 wins. They're like, well, you just can't duplicate it, especially when you had to turn over the roster. This is what college basketball has become, is roster turnover and roster management. From one season to the other, okay, we need to get the most out of these guys we have now. We have a pretty good idea, because it's not like unhappy players keep it to themselves and surprise you. I mean, it happens sometimes. You're like, well, whoa, I didn't see that one coming. But the coach has a pretty good idea from practice. This guy's probably not going to be around next year. So you're already, when you're sending your staff out on recruiting trips, you're already saying, hey, look, we're going to need to replace, our 2 guard, or we're going to need to get another center, or whatever it might be. So the good college programs and the good college staffs, and it's important to have a good staff, not just, a great coach takes you a long time, but look at any of the great programs. They have depth in their coaching staff as well as depth on their roster. So I think that Iowa State and Olzenberg, he knows what his challenge are.
Right.
I think he likes the fact that people want to dismiss it, saying, oh, gee, it was a fluke what happened last year. I don't think anything that happened last year indicated it was a fluke. It indicated we had a good coach with a good system who's flexible, and that breeds success. His players were competent. His players never got nervous in big games or in close games down the stretch. Everything was under control, and I think that's why Iowa State is a more interesting team to look at as potentially being in the top 4, as opposed to Texas or Oklahoma State or some of the other great teams. Again, it's the Big 12, but there's 10 teams in the Big 12. But top to bottom, there is no better college basketball conference in the nation. There just is not. And if you want to argue that or send your questions in, we love to have the conversations going. But
Yeah.
honestly, this is one statement, and I'm going to say a lot of really stupid things over the course of the college basketball season, but this is one statement I have 100% confidence in. This is the best top to bottom basketball conference in the nation.
Yeah, I think 9 teams could really compete in this conference. The only team that I'd say that might not stand a chance is probably outside looking is Kansas State. I know your West Virginia team, they're really excited about it. We're going to talk about them in a couple episodes when we get to the best of the rest and talk about, the plethora of other teams we're not covering in these conferences. But speaking of Iowa State, I mean, Alzenberger, I mean, what a turnaround he had last year in his first year as coach. I mean, other than, Arizona, obviously, first year coach had a great season as well. That's why he got coach of the year. But Alzenberger really deserved that title as well after the season he had for Iowa State. I like this team. I think they have one of the highest ceilings, but they also do have a pretty
Yes.
deep floor as well. Like it could be as low as ninth in the Big Ten, could be as high as two. That's how deep this conference is. I don't know if they're a front runner to win the whole thing. You never know when it comes to conference tournaments. But speaking on regular season, I just don't know if it's going to be that deep. When you look at their season so far, to start off the year, we're getting just to 2022. To finish off the year, we're going to see them in the Philman Invitational against Villanova. A lot of questions about Villanova, what kind of team they're going to be. Can Iowa State obviously capitalize on that one? And then December, we're going to see them face Iowa. Obviously, what a great rivalry that is. And then we'll see them finish the year against Baylor to start off Big 12 play. So could get a good idea what we're seeing from the Cyclones.